everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to the National Press Club. My name is Alan Adams. I'm chairman of the Board of Governors of the Press Club and an editor with the business newsletter Research Recommendations. I'd like to welcome club members and their guests in the audience today, as well as those watching on C-SPAN and those listening to this program on National Public Radio and Global Internet Computer Network. Before introducing our head table, I'd like to remind our members of some of the upcoming speakers. This is the last luncheon of the summer. We'll begin again on Wednesday, September 6th, with Alex Troutman, chairman of the board and CEO of the Ford Motor Company. On Thursday, September 7th, Secretary of Education Richard Riley will address a press club audience. And on Friday, September 8th, we have the President of Panama, Ernesto Perez Baladeras. Transcripts and audio and video tapes of press club luncheons are available by calling 1-800-NPC-2334. If you have any questions for our speaker, please write them on the cards provided at your table and pass them up to me. I will ask as many as time permits. I'd like now to introduce our head table guests and ask them to stand briefly when their names are read. From your right, John Kidner, Capital News Features. Mary Otto, Knight Ridder Newspapers. Tom Price, Dayton Daily News. Jeffrey Friedman, Asia Times. Vanita Anand, Pensions and Investments. Tobin Beck, United Press International. Skipping over our speaker, Mark Johnson, Media General News Service and Chairman of the National Press Club Speakers Committee. Doris Margolis, Editorial Associates and member of the National Press Club Speakers Committee who arranged today's luncheon. Ron Serro, Acting News Director, Washington News Network and past President of the Washington Press Club. John Fogarty, Editor, Kiplinger California Letter and past President of the National Press Club. Martin Kuhn, freelance journalist. Gus Gallagher, The Gallagher Company. And I'd like to thank staff members Melissa Bender, Pat Nelson, Melanie Abdow-Dermott, and Jeff Tarbell for organizing today's luncheon. Our guest today has been hailed as an actor's actor, and with some 85 films, plays, and TV movies to his credit, it's easy to see why. He is equally familiar as a man who speaks out on public issues. No one, says a colleague, has done more for the least popular causes. Actor and activist. Mr. Sheen perhaps represents the strongest, most public combination of those two roles. Again, no one would be better able to give us an assessment on the subject that has long intrigued the public, the impact of popular entertainment figures on public policy. Born in Dayton, Ohio, Martin Sheen was the 7th of 10 children in what he describes as a pretty poor family. He has never forgotten his roots, and his dedicated work on behalf of the underprivileged bear testament to that. Many of you will remember his searing portrayal of homeless advocate Mitch Snyder in the 1986 TV movie Samaritan, The Mitch Snyder Story. He visits with us at a time when he was deeply involved in another public interest area, the 50th anniversary of Hiroshima. Sheen's ascent to the top rungs of American filmdom have been the result of hard work, perseverance, and such impressive talent that he would be singled out for his early theater performances where the play itself was a dud. He made his Broadway debut 31 years ago in Never Live Over a Pretzel Factory, and he never looked back. Acting, narrating, and/or directing in a countless array of productions. Mr. Sheen's skills have spanned Shakespearean works, TV soaps, such as As the World Turns and The Edge of Night, movies, Apocalypse Now, Gandhi, Catch-22, Gettysburg, and of course many more. Mr. Sheen, we're delighted to have you here. We thought for a bit we'd have to bail you out. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mr. Martin Sheen.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks so much. Wow, that's very sweet. Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here. And friends, I hope you'll forgive my long delay in responding to your very kind and thoughtful invitation to speak here. It only took me a year to accept this cup because, frankly, even for a windbag like me, I'm just not a very comfortable public speaker. But then I'm never really comfortable unless I'm uncomfortable. So I'm delighted to be here, and I hope that the next few minutes we can share a few thoughts, maybe have a few laughs. I can tell you some things about myself and some of the things that I'm concerned about. My last public speaking engagement was at the fundraiser for the Catholic school system in Seattle, Washington this past February. I had been invited to come up there about 4 years ago by one of my heroes, Bishop Hunthausen, and he's since retired, but I've continued my commitment to this cause with Bishop Murphy. And the fundraiser is organized in the same way that so many of them are. They rent a big ballroom in a fancy hotel downtown Seattle and invite in all the wealthy Catholics, lock the doors, and fleece them. And I'm the MC. So this past February, I was at the hotel down in the lobby and kind of welcoming people as they came and directing them upstairs to where the fundraiser was being held. And a young couple came along. I said, are you looking for the Catholic fundraiser? I am. They said, well, fine, go up the escalator, second floor of the ballroom. Fine. Another couple came out. Are you looking for the Catholic school benefit? Yes, we are. Oh, fine. Go right up, second floor, escalator, ballroom. Here comes a guy looking me right in the eye, moving very swiftly, and gave me cause for concern. And I thought I should disarm him immediately. I said, excuse me, sir, are you here for the Catholic school benefit? No, I'm not, he says. I'm Jewish. And do you know why Catholics are delighted that Jesus was crucified rather than stoned to death? I said, no, I can't imagine why. He said, because it's a lot easier to do this than this. I almost fell on the floor laughing. He turned around, walked away without saying another word. I couldn't wait to get up to the podium and tell that story to all those rich Catholics, and I got the same reaction from them as I did from you. Before I go any further, I want to wish my son Ramon a happy birthday. He's in Nashville, Tennessee. You know, the birth of any child is an extraordinary event, but the fact that I was forced to deliver Ramon alone with my wife in our living room of a Staten Island apartment in New York, I hadn't planned it, God forbid. I could not have been more unprepared. No one could have been least prepared for a childbirth. I'd never seen a baby born. I'd never seen films of a child born, never a photograph. I had a bottle of alcohol and a copy of the New York Sunday Times. The alcohol was not for drinking and the Times was not for reading. Unfortunately, a serious situation developed, in fact, an emergency. It's very true. I thought I was going to lose both of them as the baby became lodged in the birth canal, and some spirit overcame the three of us, and we worked very hard and wrenched him out, and thank God he survived. And the paramedics arrived and things were calming down, but I was still so ignorant that I thought the placenta was his twin. They took us to the hospital where I spent most of the day making sure they were all right, and that early evening I started home exhausted and kind of walking on air, and I was headed down the street and I noticed a newsstand, and the papers were shouting the headlines that Jackie had a boy. It was August 7th, 1963. Unfortunately, young Patrick Kennedy died about 2 days later. I never met John or Jacqueline Kennedy, but the events of that day live in the book and volume of my heart, and they are fondly remembered every August 7th. So happy birthday, I want to thank Father John Deere for delivering me here this day. Father John, besides being a very close personal friend, is also a great source of inspiration and nourishment by his long commitment to gospel peacemaking and social justice through nonviolent activism. This is Father John's latest book, Peace Behind Bars, a peacemaking priest's journey from jail. You don't get many priests in jail. But I just want to read from you the first paragraph from this book. It's very brief. It will tell you who this man is, where he comes from, what he stands for, where he's going. Once I stepped across the line, my life will be changed forever. There will be no going back. I start walking. There, I've done it. I am now officially, illegally, on government property. The Seymour Johnson Air Force Base in Goldsboro, North Carolina. It is Tuesday morning, 2 a.m., December 7th, 1963. I am breaking the law. I have just walked across the down fence onto a military base. I keep on walking. It is dark, the middle of the night. There are 4 of us. 70-year-old peace activist Philip Berrigan, 30-year-old homeless advocate Lynn Fredrickson, and 24-year-old Catholic worker Bruce Frederick. The plan is to keep on walking through the woods, through the fields, over the runways, on the tarmac, to one of the enormous F-15E nuclear fighter bomber aircraft, where we will hammer on it to fulfill Isaiah's mandate to beat swords into plowshares and keep Jesus' command, love your enemies. It cost Father John 7 months in prison. He's currently still on a 2-year probation. And he joins Daniel Berrigan, one of the founders of the Plowshare Movement, also Father Carl Cabot, who is still in prison for a plowshare action recently in South Dakota, Sister Ann Montgomery, and a handful of other Americans who are truly worthy of the long-promised blessing reserved for the peacemaker. He is also the son of Mr. David Deere, who is a reporter, editor, publisher, and a member of the National Press Club since 1952. Mr. Deere is here present, and Father John is here present. And I'm very grateful to these dear people. Now, I was fortunate enough to play a role in the movie Gandhi. You all know about that film. Well, I'll tell you that it was beloved in Hollywood. Everyone in Hollywood loved it. Oh yeah, everyone in Hollywood wanted to be just like Gandhi, thin, tan, and moral. I'm indebted to the film's director, Sir Richard Attenborough, for casting me in that film, because that film brought me to India in 1981, and India brought me to myself in a very profound way and changed my life forever. I had been raised Catholic, as you heard earlier, one of 10 children. Maybe some of you here know what that's like. First up, best dressed. My parents were both immigrants, God rest them. My father was Spanish, my mother was Irish. And my real name, of course, is Ramon Esteves. I created Sheen as a make-up because at the time I began my career in New York, 1959, there was a great deal of prejudice against Hispanics. And I thought I'd sidestep the whole issue and reinvent myself. Anyway, as a young actor in New York with a big ego and a certain amount of talent, I let my Catholic faith kind of slide. And now, after 21 years of setting my hair on fire and trying to put it out with a hammer, I found myself venturing back into the fold. I've often said that Mother Teresa drove me back to Catholicism, but Daniel Berrigan keeps me there. And my reunion with the Catholic Church was not made in heaven, on the contrary, because I had joined the Church of Vatican II, the Church of Daniel Berrigan and Thomas Merton, Church of Dorothy Day, and the Catholic worker communities, the Church of Cesar Chavez and Archbishop Romero, the Church of Dom Hilda Karma and Mother Teresa and Father Aristide, the church who celebrated the poor and the marginalized, who celebrated and followed the nonviolent Jesus. I would no longer be inspired by the idea of immortality, but rather by the promise of resurrection. And as a result, the past 14 years have been the most difficult, but equally the most meaningful, and by far the happiest of my life. And as Reverend King said, the church is the place to go forth from. And I could not go forth without an identification for this new adventure. So I believe all of us need to identify ourselves, no matter who we are, where we find ourselves. I think it's really vital that we do this. If we fail to identify ourselves, there are enough entities in our culture that would be very happy to do it on our behalf. And they include our professions, our religions, our political parties, even talk show hosts, the government, even our families, the military, not to mention pollsters, just to name a few. And some of us will spend a lifetime trying to free our identities from these common cultural bonds. Then we must do so in order to truly know ourselves and take personal responsibility for our lives. For my own part, I prepared a personal ID should I ever lose sight of my true self. And it goes as follows. I am Ramon, called Martin, your brother, a private citizen with a public image who tries to confront the vital issues of peace, the environment, and social justice through a loving commitment to nonviolent witness in an effort to unite the will of the Spirit to the work of the flesh. That sounds a little preachy. I'll share a story with you about Mahatma Gandhi. One day, a mother brought her young child to Gandhi and said, "Please, Gandhiji, you must tell my son to stop eating sweets." And Gandhi thought a moment. He said, "Well, all right, can you come back in 2 days' time?" "Fine," she says. She leaves. 2 days later, she comes back again. And Gandhi takes the child aside and says, "Don't eat sweets." And the mother says, "Is that all?" And Gandhi says, "Yes." And the mother says, "Well, I appreciate that, but why couldn't you have said that 2 days ago?" And Gandhi said, "Because 2 days ago I was still eating sweets." I believe it is very important, I'd say, to identify ourselves. And we begin to identify ourselves by really examining personally who we are before we can go out into the world and announce who we are and know what we want to do. And I believe there's a very deeply personal and very powerful knowingness, or inane truth, if you want to call it that, in each one of us, which demands that we acknowledge our true selves for our own sake. And I believe an important part of that knowingness is the ego. And I believe that the most important part of the ego is to assure us that we are not God. And for most of us, that's a great relief, but for some of us, it's a big problem. I believe we are of God, and I sincerely believe that no matter what we're doing or who we are or where we are in search of God. But we are free to be ourselves. Our lives are wonderful gifts. They are exciting mysteries to be joyfully explored. Our lives are not problems to be solved. We are each of us here for each other. But if we become ego-centered and selfish, focusing only on ourselves with no care or service to others, fear and anger will dominate our lives. And we'll be like the guy standing on the corner on the coldest day of the year who wets his pants. He gets a very warm feeling for a little while, but that's about it. An honest life is not easy. It's not supposed to be. If it were easy, it wouldn't be life, and it certainly wouldn't be honest. I assume that you know what I do for a living, but what I do for peace and social justice is what I do to stay alive. During a recent interview, I was asked if my activism had hurt my career, and without hesitation, I responded, "I hope so. I'd hate to think it was because of bad acting." Then there is always the question, does celebrity involvement help or hinder a cause? I assume that means from the media's point of view, because I don't know anyone else who really cares. My experience has taught me that there are always those in the media who will love you no matter what you do, and there are always those in the media who will not love you no matter what you do. And so you consider each side equally and ignore them. But this above all, no matter what I am called to do, I am never asked to be successful. I am only asked to be faithful. And the only person I may ever change may be myself. My involvement in peace and social justice has always been a deeply personal commitment. I believe anything of real value, whether in the arts or public service, must be personal. Anything impersonal is generally of little value or lasting effect. And so consequently, I couldn't think of a better way to celebrate my 55th birthday this past week than by protesting at the Pentagon for disarmament, and with a personal apology to the Japanese people for the atomic attacks on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It seems to me that if you hurt someone, it's always a good idea to apologize. Not only does it help the injured party, but it helps yourself. St. Francis says, "Praise to you, my Lord, for those who pardon one another in your name." You know, it occurs to me that the closest thing to an apology by a high-profile American concerning Hiroshima came from General Eisenhower, who said, quote, "We should never have dropped that horrible thing on those people." And I agree. And isn't it interesting that with all of the horrible violence that is tearing our culture apart for these past 50 years. I have never heard, maybe I'm not listening close enough, but I have never heard of a high-profile politician who has advocated nonviolence as a family value. We have become addicted to personal and institutionalized violence. Our cities are crumbling. We're killing each other at a rate of 24,000 people a year by handguns, and we're maiming an additional 100,000. We ought to seriously consider establishing a program of Violence Anonymous. Nonviolence is the ultimate family value. If we're going to uphold family values, we need to be consistent and uphold nonviolence and teach children nonviolence and model nonviolence for future generations. I wholeheartedly support those in Congress who criticize Hollywood for promoting violence in films and television. But Congress must stop seeing the speck in its neighbor's eye and begin to feel the 2x4 in its own. They must stop funding the Pentagon at $288 billion a year. They must stop seeking military solutions to international crises such as Bosnia and Central America, and start funding nonviolent alternatives to conflict, and get to the root of violence by serving the poor, housing the homeless, feeding the hungry, educating the ignorant, creating jobs for the unemployed, outlawing weapons trading around the world, dismantling our existing nuclear arsenal, and cleaning up the environment. Nonviolence is not a sometimes thing. You cannot expect to be effective if you are pro-life and against violence in the entertainment field and then advocate the death penalty and military solutions in Bosnia. Being truly nonviolent and consistent means saying a very clear no to every form of violence, all war, all nuclear weapons, all capital punishment, all racism, all sexism, all torture, all poverty, and every threat to the environment. To be truly pro-life, we must be nonviolent towards everyone, including the poor and all of our enemies. By the way, the Center to Prevent Handgun Violence is hosting a benefit screening of The American President, a new film from director Rob Reiner, starring Michael Douglas and Annette Bening, and co-starring yours truly, Richard Dreyfuss, Michael J. Fox, David Paymer, and Ann Devere Smith. It's here in Washington on November the 9th. Although I'm not able to attend due to a prior commitment, I urge your attendance to benefit the center, which of course is founded by those two very heroic people, James and Sarah Brady. And lastly, friends, I want to use this public forum to make a personal appeal to French President Jacques Chirac and the French people to reconsider the resumption of nuclear testing in the Pacific next month. And I would like to suggest canceling those tests in the name and in the honor of Jacques Cousteau, who more than anyone on earth taught us about the oceans of this planet and all the precious life they contain that vitally needs our protection. Seems to me a very last thing this old world needs is another nuclear bomb exploding in its belly. Thanks for your attention. I appreciate it. All the best. I don't get to sit. I lost my seat.
We have a number of questions here.
Oh, I can't imagine
Sorry
why.
about that. I think this one perhaps is refers to your talk primarily about your activist role, but this asks, what is the spiritual connection between actor and activist?
I don't know, really. I'm still looking for it. But I think that the road to spirituality begins with creativity. And I think that an actor, an artist, anyone involved in the arts has to be interested in creativity. I don't think that you can get off the hook without having some measure of spirituality, whether you call it that or not. Some transcendence, some knowingness. I think it has to be something very deeply personal. As I said earlier, if it's not personal, it's impersonal. If it's impersonal, who really gives a damn, you know? How many of you here present were present last night at the National Cathedral for the prayer service? 1, 2, 3, 4? Okay. And the rest of you, maybe you heard what went on there. We had a service commemorating the bombing of Hiroshima, August 6, 1945. And we were told that the cathedral, that is, those in charge there, were not taking a position. They had no opinion on this business of whether it was a humane thing or a mistake to drop the bomb on the Japanese. And we were somewhat constrained in that. And we gathered in this holy ground, in this holy place, to serve God, which means to serve the truth, and nobody was speaking the truth. We were given things to say. I participated just as much as anyone else. And then Daniel Berrigan got up. Incidentally, he was arrested at the Pentagon this morning. He was unable to be here. And Dan spoke a little truth. And the Spirit entered that cathedral, and it freed all of us. And not just us, but those poor souls who were given the command not to publicly say anything about Hiroshima. So I'm very grateful to Dan Berrigan and the Holy Spirit for pushing us all towards freedom, because that's the only thing we lack. We are so governed by fear. I see it in the faces of people all over this country, everywhere you go. People are afraid to be themselves. People are afraid to express their heart, to expose their souls to anything that is not kosher, anything that is not acceptable. And my friends, that's what our identity is. The problem with our culture, as I see going down towards the end of this millennium, is silence. And all I'm trying to do with my life and my work and my appearance publicly, even privately, wherever I go, is to put words on the heart, put words on what we're really thinking, what we're really feeling, and to alleviate some of this awful, awful fear. There is nothing to be afraid of. Just express your hearts and your souls and let the Spirit in and be pushed towards real freedom. I don't think that answers the question, but I did want to say that.
This is a question referring to your suggestion about, or your remarks about apologizing to Japan. Don't you think Japan should apologize for its attack on China, the rape of Nanking, the attack on Pearl Harbor, and the Bataan Death March before the U.S. considers an apology to Japan for Hiroshima?
Yes to the first four, no to the last. Sorry.
That's all right. I didn't get to sit down. What is the solution for homelessness, the short-term solution? What should Congress do, the President?
Oh, God, if I knew the answer to that, I'd be out there doing it. I don't know what it is. It's just homelessness is really a reflection of the problem with everything else in our culture. We are homeless. Homes are demolished all over the place. We destroy the homes we have. We have single parents, we have divorced parents, we have multiple divorces and multiple marriages, and how can we expect to be able to solve problems on the streets when we cannot solve them in our own homes? So all of us are really homeless in a lot of ways. We're spiritually homeless. So I think the homeless on the street are a reflection of who we really are inside, all the things that we hide, all our embarrassments. You know, as an actor, I do publicly what everyone else does privately, and so all those things we're doing privately in our homes. The homeless are doing on the street, and the only way maybe we can change it is by opening our hearts and maybe try to open our doors a little bit, let some of these folks in and listen to them. If only you are touched some way that you become more compassionate towards yourself or your spouse or a child or someone you don't even know, then it is really important to make contact with broken people, people on the street, and homeless. See yourself in them, and let them see themselves in you, and you'll find you have a whole lot in common. I don't know how else to solve it.
Mr. Sheen, you're in Washington, so you have to expect this kind of question. As an activist, how do you rate President Clinton's administration?
I like him a lot personally, and I think he's doing a good job. I really pull for him. I never saw a guy in public life take such a beating from so many areas. And I think the way he's handling it is really incredible, and I wish him all the best. Naturally, I'd like to see him shut down the Pentagon and end all funding there and destroy all our stockpiled nuclear weapons and use all the money to serve the poor. But I don't think he's really in a position to do that. But I love him personally, and I wish him all the best.
We have some questions on your other career. What do you see as the impact of communications mega mergers? Disney, Westinghouse, GE, with the 3 networks. What does this mean for the arts, entertainment, and let alone the news program?
Well, I don't know if we're going to be able to tell the difference. And that's pretty much the way we've been moving for an awful long time. You know, news is show business. I don't know. For my own part, I'm not really involved in it. I don't own any stock in any of these companies, and I don't really pay much attention to them. So I don't really have much of an opinion. I think the press has a responsibility, and I think by and large they fulfill that. I'm always grateful when you guys show up at the demonstrations, because it lessens the chance of any violence, because the whole world's watching when you guys are there. I think that's a very important thing, and I encourage you to cover such things. I don't know what kind of stories you're writing, because I don't read them, but I certainly appreciate your presence when I see you there. So.
You have worked in all 3 mediums, TV, theater, films. Which is the most effective, makes the most impact on the public from your point of view?
Well, I think it's the project itself. You can do a great play and no one will see it. You can make a great television film and no one will see it. Do a great movie and no one goes to it. So you can't judge the effect. You can only judge the effect it has on you and why you're doing it. So it's the material and hopefully the chance that it has of getting exposed to the general public. You can't ever control that. I mean, you can spend as much money on publicity as you did on making a film, but you can't guarantee you're going to get a return or that anyone is ever going to see the film or get the point. You know, Samuel Goldwyn once said, if you want to send a message, use Western Union. And he was in the entertainment business. So I don't know, man. You know, it seems to me that the two have been heading together for so long, and that I don't know. It's hard to say. I guess it's just up to the material and the people involved in it, and how much they believe in it, and how personal it is, and how much they want that message to get out there. That really determines the success of it, whether it's successful now or 50 years from now. I once did a film that was bombed so badly that it took 5 years before it became a classic.
And there are several questions on this subject. What is the responsibility of the entertainment medium when it comes to violence, sex, and what, in my view, is a heavy dose of daily trash on television? What should you and your compatriots be doing about this?
It sounds like I wrote that question. I'm certainly in agreement with that. I think it is a bunch of trash, most of it, and unfortunately, you know, I'm involved in it. Don't eat sweets, you know. So you know, I should put the fire out of my head again with this hammer. No, man, it's pretty bad. The sad thing is not only what we're doing, but the way we're doing it, and the way children are influenced by the violence they're seeing in cartoons and some of these shows, which I can't believe they're on the air. The insidious violence and subtle forms of violence. And then you go to the playground, you see two kids beating the hell out of each other, and you wonder where they learn. And they laugh when they knock each other down and hurt each other. And they stand back and you say, what kind of action is this? Where does this come from? Go and look at what they're looking at on television, you know. It's a pretty sad state of affairs. You know, some of these talk show hosts, God, I listen to the radio for music mostly, but sometimes I get stuck with these guys, and I'm forced to listen to some of the things they say. I think the worst disservice they give the country is they desensitize the a sympathetic public towards the poor, towards the marginalized, towards the homeless, the unemployed, the incarcerated. That's the worst service they could perform. And when you think of how they're doing it, what are they doing? They do that personally. If one of them dropped dead, there'd be a guy walk in the next day with the same message, and they keep going. So you got to examine who's sponsoring the program. They're selling cars and clothes and groceries and land and insurance and all sorts of things with that message. That's what's going down. That's what the media has to start paying attention to. You're sponsored. You're selling goods and services with this kind of rhetoric. And I think it's very damaging, but it's entertainment. You know that, what's the guy's name that, can't think of his name, what? See how easily you know who he is? You know, this guy, I mean, he said it on himself once. He said, "Don't take me seriously, I'm a clown." What are we taking him seriously for? Let's take him at his word, you know? So, I don't know. Did that answer the question? I hope so. Yeah. I'm such a windbag. You thought I was kidding when I started, didn't you? Next.
Here we go.
Next.
All right. We'll change the subject for you.
Okay,
you have worked in Croatia and Bosnia.
Yeah.
What do you think of the recent Croat offensive, and how does it fit your nonviolent persuasion?
You don't have to be of nonviolent persuasion to have your heart broken about what's going on over there. I've been to Bosnia-Herzegovina 3 different trips. In 1988, I made a documentary film on Medjugorje, the little place in Bosnia where it is claimed the Holy Mother is appearing to these visionaries, and still is to this day. And that began in 1981. So I went there to investigate it and did a documentary in '88. And then I returned this past year in Zagreb and in Bosnia to film a story, a dramatized story about the events of Medjugorje. The film is called Gospa, which in Croatian means Our Lady. And what I saw even then, and this is of course long before the horrors have descended on it this past year, this past few days, but the country looks like a movie set. Holes in nearly every building of every village along every road. It's heartbreaking what they have done to themselves, and unfortunately it may take another generation to solve some of these problems, because the bloodletting has been so deep and has run so long and has divided so many families and communities that they may not be able to get it back together in our lifetime. This recent offensive by the Croatians just a few days ago, the anniversary of Hiroshima, as a matter of fact, is most disheartening. I had met with President Tushman last year and talked about him being the initiator of peace in the region, because the Croatians, frankly, have the strongest connections here in the United States. They have a great community here all over the United States, Canada and Australia. Some of them are very powerful in the political arena and financial arena, and they have a great deal of influence in the West, and they could have made this thing go either way. So I'm very confused about what Our Lady of Medjugorje, the Mother of Peace, really means. And does she really speak Croatian? I don't know, man. I think of Our Lady as being Jewish and Bosnian and Serbian and American and Canadian and Chinese and Japanese and all denominations of all people of God. And I think the Croatians are going to have a lot to answer for themselves. I think they did to the Muslims what the Serbians did to them in the beginning of this horrible war. And they've laid low the last few years so they could arm and train and now go after them. And you know, there's an old Jewish adage which says, choose your enemy well, for he is what you will become. And I think that's what we're seeing in all of Bosnia-Herzegovina. My heart goes out to these people and to this country. And the worst is not over. So, please God, some measure of truth and peace will come to that dear place.
There are a number of questions about the arts and your role. I guess this question is just one. Is there a ceiling on true artistry that can't be expanded, however big the communications explosion?
Is there, say it again for me, please. Is there
a ceiling on true artistry, even with the communications explosion that opened so many avenues?
No, I don't think so. It just depends on what we determine is real artistry. we bandy that thing around, but art is something that is based in truth and is universal. And I don't know very much what we're seeing that's coming down the pike today described as art is really art. I don't know, man. You know, some of it could be, but I don't know how long it's going to be around. But the art of the ages past has stood the test of time and moved the hearts of every generation that have surrendered to it. So I don't know what we're in for now, but I don't think it's very artistic. I'm a little worried about it.
I guess that question in part refers to the 500 cable channels rather than 50, and whether that enhances the artistic role.
Oh, I see. Gee, I don't know, man. You know, I don't have one of those cable deals, you know. So.
Okay. Well, that isn't our gift today, but we certainly should have thought of that. What was your favorite acting role and why? Now, there are several questions to that point. So.
Oh, okay. My favorite role was in a movie called Badlands that I made in 1972, directed by Terrence Malick, written by Terrence Malick as well. And it was released through Warner Brothers in 1974. Did I say 72 we made it? Yeah, it was a long time getting to the screens because he made it independently and on a very low budget. And it began to have a life of its own and became what they very graciously call a modern classic. And it was the most fun I ever had making a picture. We made it over in a little community in Colorado. I guess the most important picture, if pictures are important, or at least to me it was important, because it changed my life in so many ways, that I ever did was Francis Ford Coppola's Apocalypse Now, which we made in the Philippines in 1976 and 77. That had the strongest impact on me personally, as well as my career. In fact, it really got me international notoriety, which I had never had before or since. And I'm very grateful to both of those men. They are the best directors I'd ever worked with and best films that I ever made.
You recently were arrested for demonstrating at the Pentagon without a permit.
Oh, is that what I needed? Oh, how silly of me.
Well,
why didn't I think of that?
Well, I'll go on, because you may have to.
It gets worse.
Does it benefit your cause to demonstrate without first requesting a permit? Is there a point to be made, and if so, does the bombing of the federal building in Oklahoma change that point?
I don't get the connection.
Well, I don't either, exactly. But I think it's to be the point, should you make your presence known when you're with a formal position through a permit.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, all right. Well, in fact, I did go there with the permit. I'm commanded to speak the truth, and so I kind of take that personal. And I went there to talk to the Secretary of Defense. And he wasn't receiving that day. It was a little early. And so I hung around and I petitioned those that were preventing us from getting in. I said, well, just give him a call and tell him I'm out here and I'd like very much to see him. No, you can't do that. You have to make an appointment. I said, well, I don't have time. I'm only in town for a little while. And if I had known I needed a permit earlier, I guess I would have applied for one, but I didn't. So there you are, and I'll be back here in court on October 6th to answer for that, unless my good friend and lawyer Joe Cosgrove can represent me there. Well, what is this business of going to the Pentagon? Who was the bank robber? Sutton? I remember him. What was his name? Willie Sutton was asked why he robbed banks, and he said, that's where the money is. I go to the Pentagon because that's where the war planning is made, and that's where the budgets are made that make the weapons, and that's where the people work who have to have some alternative to war making with their lives, I think. Because I don't think we're made whole by doing that. I don't think we're made people. I think we deny a good deal of ourselves if we spend our whole lives preparing for war and making the munitions for war and spending the money for war. Some people do, and they have to answer for that themselves, you know. But for my own part, I don't think war making or war preparation is any good for the human species, and so just for me and my own salvation and my own truth, I have to go there and say, hey, guys and gals, you can't do this in my name anymore. I protest. And I come as a member of a faith community. I believe that non-violence is the only way. And my church tells me that that's true too. If Jesus is not non-violent, then I don't really want any part of him, because all that he did then is a lie.
Why does the church you love so much continue to treat women as second-class people?
I wish my friend John Deere could answer that. Oh man, you know, it's you know, Dorothy Dace called the church the cross that Jesus is crucified on. And that's a very good description. They too need redemption and salvation, and they too are entitled to liberation and freedom. And so we stay in that institution. But the faith is ours, and we have to claim it. As long as we're telling the truth and we're doing it nonviolently and lovingly, that faith is ours. And we have to remind our friends in the church, in the bureaucracy, in the power structure, that we are all God's people, male and female. And the way the church is going now, I don't know if it'll happen in our lifetime, but I think we'll see women priests, and maybe men will have the choice of marriage, as well as women, and can still be ordained. I think it's the only future that we can really expect with any intelligence. And I know that it's going to happen. But then I don't speak as an authority on the church. Thank God.
Here is a family question.
Oh dear.
2 parts.
This is the one I was the most afraid of.
2 parts. Has working with your sons, Charlie Sheen and Emilio Estevez, been a positive or negative experience? And do the 3 of you actively look for projects to do together? Second part. Do you regret...
I've already forgotten the first one. Wait a minute.
I'll remind you if we get to it. Do you regret that your children followed you into the Hollywood industry?
Is that what we're in? I thought we were actors. Oh, dear. I really have forgotten the first one. I'm sorry.
Okay. Working with your sons,
yeah.
Did it have a positive, or was it a positive or negative experience for you in the...
Okay, I got that. Okay, let me deal with that one first. In fact, the most fun I ever had in my life was working with my children. I've worked with all 4 of them. You know, I have a daughter, Renee, who is also involved in this business, and my son, Ramon, who's also an actor, as well as a country and western singer and songwriter in Nashville. But working with my children is very sacramental because we know all about each other. We know each other's secrets, and so when we work together, we've got to be real careful. We're taking out into a public arena things that are deeply personal, and we've got to be very, very careful with each other's feelings. And so I had an opportunity to direct Charlie and Ramon in a film called Cadence, which we did in Canada in 1989. And not only was I directing, but I was forced to play a large role and was the protagonist in the film. Because we lost another actor and I couldn't replace him. Our budget was too small, and so I had to step into this part and play with these guys. And the responsibility for someone's heart is so precious. It's like someone standing up next to you there and telling the whole room a secret they just told you. That's what acting is like in a lot of ways. It's very freeing, but it is terribly sensitive and sometimes very frightening because all your secrets get out. What I do, basically, as an actor is show you who I am through every role I play. No matter what the name of the character is, I will show you some part of myself. I say, hey gang, look at that, it's Martin, I'm playing Apocalypse Now, and I'm here in this jungle, but boom, and I close it up again. You say, my God, what was that? Oh, that was the character. No, it wasn't, it was me. But I am entitled, I'm given the license, as it were, to explore that part of myself in a public way. And that's what makes it sacramental, because it is truth-saying. It is a community trying to find the truth about something. And sometimes it's very painful, and it's deeply personal work. As I said earlier, if it's not personal, it's nothing. Nobody cares. So, working with these guys is the deepest, most satisfying feeling that I've ever had as an actor, and I look forward to it all the time. And praise be the Lord, I'm going to have it again this October with Emilio, who bought the rights to this play called Homefront, and he's doing it in Austin, Texas. We've just acquired the services of Kathy Bates, and we start filming in October over there. And he's directing and starring, so I get to play his old man. Tough part, huh? But this is something I really look forward to. I'll tell you a little story. Do we have time? One little story? Okay. Because this is interesting. When I was doing Cadence, there was a scene that some of you may know. The story is around this young soldier who's stationed in West Germany in 1965. He comes home to Montana, this very rural area, to bury his father. His mother died some years ago. Now he's an orphan, and he's broken by this whole experience. So I hired a guy to play his father that had known him since childbirth, Matt Clark, a dear friend of mine as well, one of my closest, oldest friends. But Matt could only come and work for one day. He had another commitment in another state, and he couldn't stay any longer than this one day. So I had to film all of his scenes in that one short 24-hour period. And part of the scene he's involved in is in the casket. He has only to lay there and make up that he's dead. And it's Charlie's point of view, looking into the casket, and he puts the wedding band on his father's finger and closes the casket. Then Matt had to go away, and I couldn't film him again for Charlie's reaction to this business. That was filmed 3 days later in a little rural church many, many miles away. Now Charlie has got to somehow recreate in his own self this scene. And he was over at the side, the congregation is singing, and we got this empty casket. What do you do now? Well, it was very obvious to me. I went to the makeup artist and said, can you make me look dead? And he said, you're not too far from it right now. I said, all right, I want to get in the box for Charlie. Let's see if that helps him out. And so I did. Got in the makeup, the suit, hopped in the box and said, action. And Charlie came up to the box and mourned me. And any of you that saw the film know what he did. So powerful, so moving. We got it in one take in the master, but now I needed to do a close-up. So I climbed out of the box, and we sat down in the congregation. I asked them to continue the singing while the relighting went on for a close-up. And he was weeping uncontrollably. And I sat next to him. And he said, it's real rough to do this, he said, because I know I'm going to have to do it for you someday. And I said, well, I hope it's me that goes first, because I couldn't handle it if it were you. And that's why it is sacramental. It is about a work of the heart. And if it is not about that, it's really not about anything. So working with those guys is the greatest joy that I can possibly ever hope for. I've already experienced it, and I look forward to it more than anything else in life. I praise them, I thank them, each one of them. They're my closest friends, they're fellow actors, and I adore them. Emilio, Ramon, Carlos, and Renee. that it?
No, Mr.
Oh.
Sheen, no. We've arrived at our final
I
question.
wanted to go out on a dramatic note. All right, next
This
case.
is perhaps dramatic.
You know, the only time I've seen this program, Susan, I'm going to interrupt just a minute, because I remember this guy standing on this side, you standing over there. I assume it was you, and I was watching this in a hotel room one time, because I don't get the thing, I don't think. And it was Ted Turner. And he was really upset about something, and he was pushing you out of the way and going in, and I was watching him, fascinated. Yeah. I had the pleasure of working with Ted Turner as an actor. Not many people have had that experience in Gettysburg.
Well, perhaps, excuse me.
You going to say? I just wanted to say something.
Like
oh, you didn't like? Okay, because we went on tour, a publicity tour for Gettysburg, and we traveled in New York and Los Angeles and talked to the press for hours and hours and hours. And I really got to like him. And I said something to, I think it was USA Today, and later he quoted me. Do you know what it was? I said, Ted Turner gives the rich a good name.
Well, Mr. Turner also got a copy of
A copy of mine?
Not yours.
Oh, okay.
Certificate of appreciation for your appearance here.
Oh, thank you.
And for your morning cup of coffee.
All
and
right,
National Press
thank
Club
you.
mug,
Thanks so
emblem,
much. Thank all of you. You've been so kind and patient. I appreciate it.
You aren't through yet.
Oh, we're not through yet.
This is a two-part question.
Okay.
You were mayor of Malibu at one time. Do you have any future political aspirations? Part two. What do you think about an entertainer being president?
Well, I'll start with the last question. We had an entertainer as president, and I won't say anything more. Part one, I've forgotten. Mayor of Malibu. Do I have any political aspirations? Thank God, no. I was honorary mayor of Malibu back in 1989. I lasted about 3 or 4 days because I had declared Malibu a nuclear-free zone, a safe haven for all living creatures, including the homeless. And it was very upsetting to some people. Mind you, I had no official position, and Malibu was not even a city. Now it is a city. And they have a mayor who is elected by the residents, and I'm very happy for them because they don't have to put up with me anymore.
Thank you very much.
Is that it?
That's it.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So
very good indeed. Really enjoyed it. Wonderful. Are you headed out? Where do you go?
I got to go to Dayton, Ohio.
What's your home base?
Yeah, it's my hometown. Yeah. My brother over there has had a stroke.
I heard that.
I got to go back
and talk to him.
and talk to him. Oh, all right.